when Lagan came out, that film just blew me away.
Right.
Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. That film is just so good. Hayao Miyazaki always retiring after his movies.
Yes.
I forgot that completely.
I'm glad you learned something new from this quiz.
Wow, well, that's a deep cut. I didn't remember that. Mine are slightly more refined and other things. I would love for the film to somehow come to India. That would be a dream come true.
Hello and welcome to India Wants to Know You quiz. My name is Sai Ganesh. I'm your host, and today we have a very special guest. This is Usman Riaz. Welcome, Usman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So this is a simple quiz. The quiz is really about you. So all the answers that you give are absolutely correct. The questions will be about you and your background. We'll discuss your feature film that you've released recently, know your mind both. And finally, we will ask a few questions, are things that you didn't know about yourself. And then finally, a few questions from our audience. Ready to go?
Perfect.
All right?
Yes.
So for our audience, please state your name and place of origin.
So my name is Usman Riaz and I reside in Karachi, Pakistan.
Your occupation, please.
I am the director, animator and co-composer of The Glassworker. I'm the co-founder of Mano Animation Studios, which is Pakistan's first hand-drawn animation studio. I spent the last 10 years making my feature film.
That's fantastic. You mentioned that you're the founder of Pakistan's first hand-drawn animation studio called Mano Studio. So which animal is the animation studio named after and why?
Mano is the colloquial way of saying cat over here. So it's like just a generic cat name. My cat's name was Mano when 10 years old. So I named the studio after Mano, my cat. But the reason I did that is because it sounds simple. It's easy to pronounce by both people from here and abroad, especially in Japan. They can easily say ma and no. It's part of their vocabulary, so I thought I'd call the studio that.
That's fantastic. That's a really good insight into how to name brands or things that you start off with, so that's easy for people to pronounce. For an audience who's not familiar necessarily with Glassworker, how would you describe The Glassworker in a few lines?
The Glassworker is a coming-of-age story about two children, Vincent and Elise. They're from separate walks of life. One is an aspiring glassblower, learning from his father in their artisan glass shop, and the other is a gifted violinist, struggling to find her own unique voice on the instrument. And the film follows both characters as they grow up, while a growing threat of war begins to strain their relationship.
You were inspired to create an animation studio after you visited Japan, a particular location in Japan which is kind of a dream destination for anyone who's a fan of anime. Can you tell us which location in Japan and what was your experience like?
The idea for The Glassworker started in 2014, and I kept grappling with the idea of how should I make this film. And obviously, being inspired by Japanese animation, the first place that I wanted to actually go and just not even pitch, but just get a feel for how I could make it in Japan. So I went in 2015 after speaking at TEDx Tokyo, because I'm a TED senior fellow, so I've spoken at the main TED conferences. And after my talk, I was invited to Studio Ghibli, which is my favorite animation studio in the world, and I'm sure everybody else's favorite animation studio. So that was an eye-opening experience. I got to just understand the workflow and understand more about working in Japan, and visited various studios after that, but Studio Ghibli was obviously the highlight. I was with a man named Shin Hashida. Very kindly said, if you want to make your film The Glassworker, because I showed my early storyboards and concept drawings, he recommended you should start your own studio. And I always joke that maybe he was just trying to get rid of me because I was roaming around in the studio, but I took that advice to heart and began forming what would become the actual studio. The co-founder of the studio is my wife, Mariam, and the three of us that run the studio, it's myself, Mariam Khizr being my cousin. So it's a family, and yeah, we haven't looked back since then.
Fantastic. I'm so glad you mentioned the fact that you work with your family members, and that was going to be my next question. You mentioned visiting Studio Ghibli. You've not mentioned one particular Japanese filmmaker. So who's your favorite Japanese filmmaker who has inspired you the most since childhood?
My favorite Japanese filmmaker since I was a child is obviously Hayao Miyazaki, and also Isao Takahata. I love his films very much. I think The Grave of the Fireflies is the obvious answer. It's such a powerful film, but I think Only Yesterday is such a beautiful, incredible movie about just life and youth and growing up. That's an incredible film. I love the silliness and magic in Poco. just incredible movies. And The Tale of Princess Kaguya is just breathtaking film. But I also like My Neighbors, the Yamadas. So
Yes.
pretty much his entire library is phenomenal. Hayao Miyazaki is he's a genius. Every single film you can find something to love. The first film of his that I saw was Kiki's Delivery Service. I was a child when I saw it. Somebody had taped over Kiki's Delivery Service. So when I was watching that, the cartoons would end and Kiki's Delivery Service would start like 20 minutes in. And I remember being obsessed with that film and not knowing why I like it, but just knowing that there's something special about this. Then as I got older, I learned of Studio Ghibli, and there's this studio in Japan and this legendary director Hayao Miyazaki, and I saw Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, all those films. Spirited Away is the film I actually waited for because I was old enough to appreciate that Hayao Miyazaki is making something, and I was still a kid though, so I just remember key moments in my life with his movies coming out and him always retiring after his movies.
Yes.
So I really thought he was done after The Wind Rises. Then The Boy and the Heron came out. It was a phenomenal movie. So I was just grateful that Hayao Miyazaki has given us another film to treasure.
We were very lucky in India. I think Boy and the Heron was one of the few Miyazaki films that released in theaters in India. So we were lucky enough to catch that.
Yeah, I saw it in the cinema as well. I was invited to the IMAX premiere in Los Angeles, and just to see it on that huge screen was I'm gonna start crying. Let's move on.
There's nothing wrong in that.
So I studied all of these people and found my rhythm and style for The Glassworker, but you can see that mine are slightly more refined and other things.
Beautiful.
But yeah, this is one of the boards that I just put on the cover. I drew the whole film like that.
Fantastic. So for the uninitiated, what first in Pakistan did the film Glassworker achieve?
So Pakistan's film industry is, I won't say non-existent. There are a lot of people doing very, very good work and working very hard. But the film industry's infrastructure is kind of difficult to manage. So an animated film's infrastructure was completely non-existent. With hand-drawn animation, no one had really picked up the mantle. This being Pakistan's first hand-drawn animation, I wanted to do it right.
Fantastic. And that brings me to the next question, that what are the jobs that you were doing on The Glassworker? I know it wasn't just one single role. Can you tell us all the roles that you fulfilled while making this film?
I think for the case of myself especially, but also Khizr and Mariam, we had to wear multiple hats throughout this production. We would spend our days working at the studio with our team here in Pakistan, and then our nights corresponding with our international team. For the longest time had the worst routine imaginable, where you'd sleep for a few hours and then go into the studio in the day, work, and then come at night and sit in meetings. That's what I mean by when you work with family, you bring the work home, but I think we were all driven by the passion of we have to get this done. And there's a reason nobody else has done it. It's because it's difficult. But speaking for myself, I was the storyboarder of The Glassworker, so I drew the entire film out in great detail so that the team could understand exactly what the vision was for the film. I was an editor on the film, so I edited the animatic together. Mariam and I did all of the scratch voice acting for the film before we had our actual voice actors. Again, animated on the project. I assisted in all of the departments, creative work. Khizr was the producer on the film, but also line producer, so he would manage all of the timelines and get everybody to work according to a certain time frame. It was very, very important for us to complete the film on time.
Can I also go back to the question, did you also compose the music for this film?
Oh yeah, because I had so many hats, I didn't remember that part. I was also co-composer on the film.
So moving on to the question, you mentioned that the story revolves around two characters called Vincent and Alice. Is Alice based on anybody who's close to you?
That premise was based on my mother. My mother was the daughter of an army colonel. My grandfather passed away, and she would describe these experiences of her father leaving and her worrying for his safety and things like that. So that I drew inspiration from those aspects and put that into the character. Backstory to the names is that I wanted the names to be Murano for Elise instead of Elise Amano, Nadia Amano. The original names were Colonel Murano and Elise Murano, Nadia Murano, because I wanted to do a callback to the Murano glassblowers in Venice, but we decided that we should just change it and make it neutral. But I would have loved to do that. So those were the original names for the characters.
Oh, lovely. That's a great piece of information to learn from. Unfortunately, that also ruins ruins my next question. My next question is going to be, the idea of a glassblower came to you while visiting which Italian city? And you just mentioned that city. Could you tell us your experience of visiting this island?
So I saw the glass blowers in Venice, and I remembered, again, not thinking that I would make a movie about it. I was 15 or 16, and I just wondered why nobody had made a movie on this. This is so interesting. And I think 2 years after that, a movie called Perfume came out.
Yes.
So that was also about how perfume is made and the kind of intricacies that go into creating those scents and smells. And again, I thought, wow, when we have a movie about perfume, why is there no movie about glass blowing? So I thought this would be the perfect jumping off point for us to create our movie around glass blowing.
That's fantastic. It's amazing to learn how seeds of inspiration, like when you were 15 years old, you visited Italy. When you were 23, you wrote a script, and now at 33, you're releasing the film. It's amazing to see how things can be inspired from different paths. The creation of an anti-war film like Glassworker, you said, has been inspired by the state of Karachi, your hometown, following a particular global event from a decade ago. What global event do you think impacted what the state of Karachi was?
Primarily, if I were to tap into something, is probably 9/11. Just how much the world changed after 9/11. Specifically in Pakistan, I distinctly remember there was this latent fear and anxiety that was just in everybody for what is going to happen. Security and everything while you were traveling just suddenly changed. It wasn't as peaceful as the world once was. And when you're growing up, you don't really notice those things. You still keep living. I was 9 years old when it happened, so I don't really remember what I was thinking exactly, but I remember the feeling. And I wanted to just kind of comment on that there's a war happening in the distance. How does it affect our characters in the film as it's coming closer and closer and closer? So that was the idea. I think that was the seed for that idea.
Wow. 9 years old when you saw this happening around you.
Yeah, no, 2000. I was 10 years old.
So it took you 10 years to make this film, Usman. What did you feel like at the end of the 9th year? Like,
at the end of the ninth, where were we at the end of the 9th year? So it was, I think, early 2023. I can talk about how I felt when the movie finished.
Yes.
Because it was a mixture of relief, anxiety, joy, and exhaustion. I was done. I'm still done. Like, I think about the film and I get PTSD thinking of my routine, and it was so difficult to manage, not the team, not the people, but just maintaining that passion and energy, because everybody else doesn't see what the vision is. They
Yes.
come on, they like the craft and they're coming on board for the experience. It's my job to keep the vision focused.
Yes.
and go towards this goal, which is this movie, and the idea that it can be done. Maintaining that when in darker times was exhausting, and I would love to make more films.
I think one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, at any point did you lose hope?
No, I never lost hope. I don't know why I never lost hope. It's just because I knew it could be done. And I think that's the thing. Maintaining the vision is one thing. You have to be extremely focused and obsessive about the vision. But how you get there, that you can be flexible.
I think the work is there for us to see that for someone who's young like you, making your first feature film, coming out of Pakistan, and with such great craftsmanship, it's inspiring for us to know that you didn't lose hope throughout the entire journey. I think that is a key message that I wanted to get from you.
Thank you.
You mentioned this point multiple times, that you are the one defining the vision or making sure that everyone's focused on that vision, and the team that's behind you, complete credit to them. But at the same time, how lonely is it as an artist to have that vision, and is that a lonely journey?
It is, but I've been doing things alone and making things on my own since I was a child. When I would write my music, when I would do everything that I had done prior to The Glassworker, was always on my own. So it's not new territory for me. The new territory was working with a group of people and finding how to manage that. And I had tremendous support from Khizr and Mariam especially. But it is lonely, and I can't imagine it not being lonely, because if everybody had the same vision, what's the point? I would be working with somebody else who has the vision that I believe in.
Let's move on to a fun round. This is what I call as things you didn't know about yourself. These are two simple questions about your work. 3 of India's top directors are Satyajit Ray, Sanjay Leela Bansali and Vishal Bharadwaj. There is something common to all these 3 directors and yourself. Can you tell me what is common to all these 3 filmmakers and yourself? What other skill set do they have that you also have apart from directing a movie?
Do they write their own stories?
Good guess. They're actually music directors also, right? So I think it's an incredible feat for a person like you to make a film as well as help compose the music. And it's rare to see film directors like Satyajit Ray also directed, composed music. Can you tell me what does it feel like to be so multi-talented?
I can't imagine being any other way. So when I was making the film, I could automatically see what I wanted it to look like and what I wanted it to sound like. I think what you're seeing is the best parts of me. There's so many things I cannot do. But when I present my work, I obviously present the things I can do. So while I'm very, very grateful that people think I'm multi-talented.
No, I think that's a great insight into the fact, because people talk about films being a visual medium, storyboarding it or looking at it like paintings, but to also think of the music while you're making the film. Another film that's released recently in India that's getting a lot of coverage is this movie called Kalki 2898 AD. Think of it like, I called it like the Avengers of India. It's, a science fiction movie set in the future, etc. In this film, there is a city, mythological city that appears in the story of the film that shares its name with a film that you were a part of earlier in your career. Can you guess which movie, one of your earlier films that you had worked on, shares the name with the city in Kalki?
I mean, the 2 short films I made, Ruckus and The Waves, but a film I worked on earlier, I don't know. Which one?
Shambhala.
Summer Nix worked on that movie, yes. And wow, that's a deep cut. I didn't remember that. Yeah.
No, I just found it very interesting that, a recently released movie had a connection to you. So Shambhala is the name of the city in the movie, and the Shambhala, the movie that you worked on. Can you just tell our audiences what did you do on Shambhala?
I don't remember. I think I did some music for that. Yes, so I did music on that. I forgot that completely. That's amazing. Thank you for reminding me about that.
Fantastic. I'm glad you learned something new from this quiz. You mentioned how much you love the craftsmanship in Indian cinema. Can you name 2 films that come to your mind that you've seen in recent years that surprised you or just left you in awe?
I remember when Lagan came out and I watched that. The film just blew me away. Everything in it, from the story, the acting to the music, is just phenomenal. And I still listen to the soundtrack all the time.
Right.
Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. That film is just so good. It's so incredible. So yeah, but those 2 films I would say are probably my top 2 Bollywood movies, with Lagan being number 1. I think that's one of the greatest films I've ever seen.
That's fantastic, because I think if you haven't seen the documentary on the making of Lagan, you must. It's incredible the amount of rejections that they faced before they finally made this incredible movie.
That is what, we were watching that in the middle of our own rejections.
Oh, really?
And when they went through it, we were in good company.
Who are the pioneers of Pakistani cinema that have inspired you? And if you were to recommend Pakistani filmmakers or films to Indian audiences, who are the 2 that come to your mind?
Pioneer is a difficult word for me to kind of comment on, because I don't really know the history of our filmmaking infrastructure.
Sure.
But I can talk about specific filmmakers that inspired me. Number 1, obviously, being Sharmeen Abed is a 2-time Academy Award winner. Her documentaries are phenomenal. She also started a animation studio that did CG animation called Wadi. They made 3 films that were great hits in Pakistan. She made films for children, Teen Bahadur. They were movies for children that kids had superpowers, and they were great films. But I don't think the studio makes films anymore. But what she has done with her documentaries and with her just filmmaking career is inspirational. And she's directing Star Wars now, so she's directing the next film with Daisy Ridley, and she just released a documentary with Disney and Hulu as well, just recently. So she's doing phenomenal work. She was a TED Senior Fellow before me, so when I was selected for TED, she was the first one to kind of welcome me into the TED Fellows program, and she's been a great support and mentor ever since. So her work is phenomenal. And of course, Saim Sadiq, who made Joyland. Joyland is
Yes.
wonderful. Zarar Khan in Flames is a phenomenal movie. So these are the kind of filmmakers that I think about who are doing great work in Pakistan.
Thank you. This is a great list of recommendations for all of us. Now, what I found interesting is that from Pakistan, here is an anti-war film made by this young filmmaker that's gotten a lot of acclaim, and it looks nothing like what a Pakistani film would look like. Right? Schirkoa, on the other hand, is also an Indian film which doesn't look like an Indian film. And both of these stories, I feel, are talking about the kind of society that Indians and Pakistanis have been living in so far. Do you have any thoughts on this? That two animated films that don't look like anything that the countries have produced, and they're both talking about this idea of politics in their own way.
So I can only speak from my point of view.
Yes.
And I gave earlier, where I think if you have something to say, I think automatically the place you come from, it becomes kind of a statement. Again, I'm not speaking for the other director, but I think to just step away from that and just to look at the thematic content objectively. I know I try to do that, so I'm pretty sure that if that's the statement the film wants to make, that they're also trying to do that as well.
It's incredible. I can tell you that for an Indian audience member like me, it's remarkable. Like, I didn't think that films like this would be made in our times. In India and Pakistan, I think, I can't speak much of Pakistani cinema, but in Indian cinema, there's a template for the kind of movies that are made, whether it's song and dance, whether it's action, the style in which it's made, and so on. So it's inspiring to see filmmakers like you doing the kind of work that we didn't expect.
I have to say that I think what India does, especially with the film industry, Bollywood and Tollywood, it's just so incredible. And yes, you're talking about the specific formula that is in the films, but it's done so well.
Yes.
And that I think that, like, especially in Pakistan, sometimes the industry is trying to take those inspirations and put it into here. I just think it's impossible. It's a impossible mountain to climb because there's no way to compete with that. It's perfection. I love animation and hand-on animation. That's why I just felt like, okay, I can stand out like this because there's no way you can compete with Bollywood. There's no way you can compete with Hollywood. Just do your own thing and what you love and try to make something that you would enjoy watching. That was my benchmark for this film. Would I enjoy watching this? I made a film that I would love to watch, and hopefully others would love to watch as well, because the films that I love are the films that has these massive audiences who appreciate them. This is my contribution to the world of hand-on animation.
That's wonderful. You've actually mentioned this earlier as well. The films that you loved are the reasons why you're making films today. And we hope that your films become the same inspiration for others as well.
That would be, I can't comment on that because I don't know what, the film has a life of its own.
Of course.
And I certainly hope that happens. I want to say thank you to all of the animation fans in India. I genuinely did not think it would get such an amazing response because I look at the YouTube analytics, and the number one place where our trailer was viewed, the English trailer, was the US, and then right below that wasn't Pakistan, it was India.
Oh, lovely.
And I was like, wow, India is really liking this, and I would love for the film to somehow come to India. That would be a dream come true. And again, your country's films are so inspiring, and like everybody knows the songs, follows the actors, and like whenever we have weddings here, obviously a lot of the songs that people do are Bollywood songs. So it's an institution, and for me to just even be acknowledged by a few of the fans in India for my film is a huge honor. So thank you very much.